Rain streaked the corner office windows like a watercolor painting left too long in the weather. Nathan Hale didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the quarterly figures scrolling down the screen like a stock ticker. Somewhere in the background, his assistant was still talking, something about scheduling conflicts and the Thursday board meeting, but all of it faded beneath the weight of numbers and the ever-present hum of expectation. "Sir, career day," she said louder. Nathan blinked. "What?" "Career day at Jackson's school. You signed the form last month. It's this Friday." He exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. The email sat in his inbox, flagged in orange. It had been flagged for weeks. The digital equivalent of a post-it note clinging to the side of his conscience. He hadn't meant to forget. But like everything else not attached to Hale Industries, it had quietly slipped into the shadows of more urgent matters. "Right," he said finally, voice tight. "Thanks, Lauren, leave it in." She lingered. "You're really going?" Nathan met her eyes. She didn't flinch, but something in her expression wavered, like even she wasn't convinced he knew what he was getting into. "I said I'll go." When she was gone, he leaned back, gaze sliding to the framed photo on his bookshelf. Jackson, age 5, in an oversized baseball cap and chocolate smudges on his chin, looking up with the kind of uncomplicated adoration that never quite reached the inbox. Nathan let out a slow breath. He could carve out an hour. He'd done harder things than sit in a classroom and talk about mergers. Friday came with a sky scraped clean of clouds. Nathan dressed down, though his idea of casual still involved cufflinks and polished leather shoes. He rehearsed a speech in his car, using terms like entrepreneurship and venture capital, though the more he said them, the more ridiculous they sounded echoing off the dashboard of his black Audi. Maple Creek Elementary was tucked between two sycamore-lined streets, its red brick facade charming in a way that made Nathan feel instantly out of place. The parking lot was already filling with cars. Parents in yoga pants and canvas sneakers. Some carried trifold boards, others carried cupcakes. He carried a leather portfolio. The front office buzzed him in, a smiling woman handing him a sticker. "Visitor Nathan Hale." "Room 1B, she said with warmth he couldn't replicate. "Ms. Green's class, down the hall and to the right." The hallway smelled faintly of crayons and floor polish. Construction paper art hung from every wall, each piece more chaotic and colorful than the last. Nathan passed a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome, Career Heroes." He paused outside room 1B, adjusting his jacket. Inside, children laughed. Someone knocked over a chair. A voice, young, steady, was calling for quiet. He stepped in. The noise dulled immediately, like a record being lifted off a turntable. 25 small faces turned to look at him, some bored, some curious, some halfway through a snack. And at the back, Jackson's face lit up. "Dad." Nathan's throat tightened. He offered a small smile, then gave a restrained wave. "Hey, buddy." Ms. Green was younger than he expected. Late 20s maybe, with sandy hair pulled into a low bun and a pale green dress that looked soft even from a distance. Her voice carried gentle authority. "You must be Mr. Hale," she said. "Thank you for joining us." "Thank you for having me," he replied, realizing too late how formal it sounded. Jackson hurried to pull a chair next to his own. "You can sit here. This is where I sit for morning meeting and we do star sharing and—" "Let's give your dad a chance to get settled first," Ms. Green interjected, smiling as she gestured him toward the circle. "Everyone, this is Jackson's dad. He's here to tell us about his job." Nathan cleared his throat. 25 pairs of eyes, wide and blinking, waited for him to start. He opened his portfolio, closed it, then looked at Jackson, who sat forward like a wind-up toy ready to burst. I run a company," he began. "We help other businesses grow by investing in them. It's called venture capital. That means—" A hand shot up. "Yes?" he asked. A girl with a gap-toothed grin frowned. "Is that like when you give people money and they become famous?" A few kids nodded. "Sort of," Nathan replied carefully. "We give people money so they can make something they believe in. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but we try to help them get started." Another hand, a boy with chocolate on his cheek. "Do you have a jet?" He hesitated. "No, I don't." Oh, the boy slumped, visibly disappointed. A few more questions followed, some on topic, others wildly unrelated. Someone asked about dogs, another about whether he'd met Taylor Swift. Nathan laughed once unexpectedly. But as the morning wore on, something shifted. The pressure to perform faded. He wasn't at a board meeting. No one here was judging him on quarterly returns. These children didn't care about his title or his suits. They cared about stories, about why he liked his job, about what he wanted to be when he was their age. He found himself speaking less like a CEO and more like someone remembering. "Do you like your job?" one small voice asked from the edge of the circle. Nathan paused. That question hadn't been on his agenda, but it came from Jackson. His son, now staring at him with the fragile, brutal honesty only a child could offer. "I like parts of it," Nathan said slowly, "but sometimes I miss things I shouldn't." He glanced at Ms. Green. She held his gaze for a breath longer than necessary. There was no pity in it, only a quiet understanding. Afterward, the children broke into centers, puzzles, reading corners, craft tables. Nathan stayed, standing awkwardly at the side while Jackson built a paper rocket and another parent helped cut out construction paper stars. "You did well," Ms. Green said softly, sidling up beside him. "You kept their attention for 10 whole minutes. That's practically a miracle." He smirked. "I've been in front of investors who were less forgiving." She offered him a warm, quiet laugh. "Well, I'd argue first graders are tougher. At least investors don't ask if you've met Taylor Swift." He glanced at her again. Her eyes were kind. Open, but not overly so. She didn't press him with questions, didn't fill the silence with polite noise. She just stood beside him, watching the way Jackson laughed with another boy over a glue mishap. "I miss a lot," he admitted suddenly. "I try not to, but—" She waited, didn't rush him, just let the words find their shape. "He changes fast," Nathan said, barely above a whisper. Ms. Green nodded. "They all do." It was the kind of conversation that could have ended right there. But as the classroom noise swelled and Ms. Green moved to help a student who had glued her sleeve to the table, Nathan felt something settle in his chest. Not regret exactly, something gentler, something uncomfortably close to hope. He looked at his son again, then down at his watch. The meeting he'd originally planned to race back for was still on his calendar, but he didn't move. He stayed until snack time ended. Until Ms. Green thanked him again. Until Jackson hugged his leg and asked if he'd come back someday. "I'll try," Nathan said. But even as he left the room, he wasn't sure who needed that promise more, his son or himself. The following Monday, Nathan sat in his office with the skyline humming behind him. Glass, steel, movement. It was everything he had built his life upon. But his mind kept drifting, not to forecasts or deliverables, but to a classroom with walls lined in finger-painted maps and cotton ball clouds. A child had called out, "You're Jackson's dad," like it was a title, not a description. The weight of it had stuck somewhere under his ribs. He stayed longer than intended, missed the meeting. Lauren had smoothed it over, of course, told the board he was handling a personal matter. No one questioned it. Hale Industries didn't run on emotion, it ran on results. But the silence after he got home, the way Jackson kept glancing up at him from the kitchen table, had spoken louder than any balance sheet. "Did you like my classroom?" Jackson had asked that night. Nathan had paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. "I did." "Ms. Green said you were really good at talking." "She did." Jackson had nodded seriously. "She said you used words the class didn't know, but you made them sound okay anyway." Nathan wasn't sure why that sentence had followed him into his dreams, or why now, 3 days later, he still found himself wondering what Ms. Green did after the last bell rang. Tuesday came, then Wednesday. On Thursday, Nathan left the office a full hour earlier than usual, telling himself he needed to pick up a prescription from the pharmacy near the school. But he drove slower than usual past Maple Creek Elementary. The parking lot was nearly empty, teachers, cars the last ones there. He didn't stop. That night he found Jackson asleep on the couch, a half-colored drawing still clutched in his hand. It was a spaceship, 2 stick figures inside it, one with spiky hair like Jackson's, one taller wearing a tie. Something pulled inside Nathan's chest. Friday arrived with surprising warmth, the kind of April day that confused the trees into early blossoms. Nathan cleared his calendar for the morning without a real excuse, just blocked the time and stared at the screen until the meeting invite stopped blinking. He showed up at the school just after morning bell, uncertain what he was doing there, but holding a coffee in each hand. One black, one with almond milk, based solely on a guess. The receptionist raised an eyebrow, back for another round. I was wondering if Ms. Green might have a moment between classes. She's in prep right now, the woman said, smiling faintly. Down the hall, room 1B, you remember the way. He did. The classroom was quieter this time, the chaos momentarily tamed. Ms. Green sat at her desk, sorting folders, a cup of tea steaming beside her. She looked up, startled. Nathan. I didn't mean to interrupt, he said quickly. I was in the area, thought I'd return the favor. He held out the coffee. She eyed it, then accepted it slowly. You guessed right, she said after a sip. I'm impressed. Lucky guess, he said. I just remembered you didn't take the free donuts last time. That earned him a real smile, softer this time, less practiced. Did something bring you back, or just the coffee gods? He looked around, noting the new constellation map strung up near the window, the dried glue on the corner table. I think I missed it, he admitted. Not just Jackson, the feeling of this place. It's different from what I'm used to. Ms. Green leaned back. Well, we run a tight ship, glitter, chaos, and snack time included. Nathan chuckled. I don't think I've laughed that much in weeks. She tilted her head, curious but not pressing. I didn't realize how far away I'd gotten, he said, more to the empty desks than to her. From him, from everything that used to matter. A brief pause followed. You're not the only one, she said gently. A lot of parents come in and realize that it's not failure, it's just life. You notice, then you adjust. I don't know how to adjust. You showed up, that's a start. Silence filled the room again, but it was different this time. Less about what wasn't being said, more about what didn't need to be. Then the door opened, and a blur of small feet and backpacks poured in. Ms. Green straightened. Nathan stepped back, ready to leave. Stay if you want, she said, already moving toward the growing storm. We're doing a partner reading session today. Jackson will love it. He hesitated, then sat. He ended up with a little girl named Lee, who insisted on reading The Very Hungry Caterpillar out loud while showing him each page with theatrical flair. Jackson sat 2 spots over, occasionally sneaking glances at his father, grinning like it might split his face. Nathan didn't leave until the bell for lunch rang. Over the next 3 weeks, it became a pattern. He didn't announce it, didn't explain himself. He just began carving out an hour here, an hour there, dropping by room 1B with the kind of frequency that soon didn't require name tags. The children began waving when they saw him. One called him Business Dad, which made Ms. Green laugh so hard she nearly dropped a stack of worksheets. He started helping with small things, reading groups, classroom cleanup. Once he even repaired a wobbly chair with tools from his car. It was absurd. He knew Nathan Hale, the man who negotiated 9-figure deals, now wielding a screwdriver for a public school classroom. But he didn't mind. There was a kind of stillness in it, a quiet he hadn't realized he'd been starving for. One Thursday afternoon, after the class had filed out for the day and Jackson was at his mom's house, Nathan stayed behind. Ms. Green was sorting through storybooks, her cardigan pulled over her dress as the spring evening air cooled. Why do you do it? He asked, not entirely sure what he meant. This job, with all the noise and the wiping glue off desks and answering 1,000 questions about the moon. She paused, a soft smile playing on her lips. Because it matters, because every once in a while you see a kid figure something out for the first time, like really get it. And for that second they believe they can do anything. You don't forget those seconds. Nathan didn't speak right away. The wind through the open window rustled the paper stars above the reading nook. I think I forgot what that felt like, he said finally. She didn't look at him, just kept organizing, her movements slow and deliberate. Well, she said, you're remembering. He stayed until the sky outside turned pale with dusk. When he left that evening, he didn't go back to the office, didn't check his email. He drove home, sat on the living room floor, and began assembling the puzzle Jackson had abandoned 3 nights ago. It was missing 3 pieces, but somehow that didn't bother him as much as it would have before. Spring thickened into early May with the kind of gentle warmth that softened everything it touched. Trees flushed green, sidewalks bloomed with chalk art, and Maple Creek Elementary seemed to hum with the end-of-year restlessness only children could truly embody. Nathan had become something of a fixture by then. Not every day, but enough that the staff at the front desk stopped asking him to sign in, and Jackson's classmates began calling out, "Hi, Mr. Hale," with the same enthusiasm they reserved for birthday cupcakes and fire drills. He still wore a tie sometimes, but more often now it was rolled into his jacket pocket by the time he crossed the threshold of room 1B. He brought books from home sometimes, old ones from his childhood dusted off from a forgotten shelf. "You read like you're telling secrets," Lee had told him once, completely serious, and he hadn't known how to respond to that except to smile. Ms. Green had stopped seeming surprised when he showed up. Their conversations stretched longer, more relaxed. She was still precise, still composed, but he'd begun to notice the quiet weariness behind her good mornings. The way her voice dipped softer when she thought no one was listening. She gave so much of herself to those kids that Nathan began to wonder what was left for her when the day ended. One morning, a note was pinned outside the classroom door. "No VIS at yours today, testing in progress." Nathan stood there for a moment longer than necessary. The hallway was unusually quiet. He glanced down the corridor and after a beat, turned and walked toward the teacher's lounge. It was empty, lit with the dull flicker of overhead fluorescence. A pot of stale coffee steamed weakly in the corner. Ms. Green sat at the far table, red pen in hand, rubbing her temple like she could will the headache away. She looked up. "Oh," she said, straightening. "I forgot we posted the sign. Sorry, today's math assessments, the big ones." He shrugged, didn't come to read, brought this. He handed over a small takeout bag, breakfast sandwiches, warm and wrapped in 2 coffees. She blinked in surprise. "I figured teachers run on fumes," he said, "and guilt." She laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Both are accurate, you didn't have to." "I wanted to." They sat together in silence for a while, both of them picking at their sandwiches while papers rustled between them. Nathan had never lingered in a teacher's lounge before. It felt like entering a sacred, over-caffeinated temple. "I used to think showing up meant being in the same room," he said after a while. "Turns out it's more than that." She looked at him closely, not saying anything. "I wasn't always like this," he added. "When Jackson was born, I swore I'd never miss the important stuff. Then the company took off. I blinked and he was 5. "You're here now," she said simply. He shook his head. "Sometimes I think I'm too late." "You're not," she said, and this time her voice was firm, steady. "Trust me, these kids, they remember the ones who show up." Nathan didn't respond, but the words clung to him like warmth on skin long after he left. Later that week, Jackson handed him a crumpled sheet from his backpack. It was an invite. "Family picnic day next Friday. Bring a blanket, lunch, and your favorite game." He circled the date on his calendar with red ink, then typed out an out-of-office reply he'd never written before. Friday arrived bright and cloudless. The school lawn was dotted with blankets and picnic baskets, small groups of kids weaving between adults like wind-up toys on sugar highs. Nathan arrived in jeans. He carried a cooler bag, 2 sandwiches, and a box of Jackson's favorite dinosaur-shaped gummies. He also carried a board game, one they'd tried and failed to finish several times at home. Jackson's face lit up like the sun when he spotted him. They sat under a tree. Jackson launched into stories about the week, about how Ms. Green had let them plant sunflowers and how Timmy accidentally spilled glitter in the fish tank. Nathan listened, not just with his ears but with his whole self, laughing in all the right places, asking follow-up questions instead of glancing at his phone. After lunch, Jackson tugged at his sleeve. "Can we play now?" Nathan nodded and spread out the board game. A few other kids wandered over, and soon he found himself refereeing a 4-player game of Pirate Island with serious negotiations over buried treasure and plastic gold coins. Miss Green passed by at one point, barefoot in the grass, her dress caught in the wind. She gave him a wave that was half amused, half impressed. "You're braver than I am," she said. He tipped an imaginary hat. Corporate diplomacy has nothing on 7-year-olds and pirate law. She laughed and moved on, but the sound of it lingered. When the game ended, Jackson leaned against him, tired but smiling. "Best picnic ever," he mumbled. Nathan kissed the top of his head without thinking. A week later, Ms. Green asked him if he'd help chaperone the end-of-year field trip to the Children's Museum downtown. "Only if you need the extra hand," he'd said. "I need someone who won't lose a child in the dinosaur exhibit," she replied. "I can't make any promises," he said, but agreed anyway. The museum day was chaotic, bright, and loud. He ended up with a group of 5, including Jackson, who were determined to see every exhibit in the building twice. Ms. Green floated through the day with practiced grace, keeping kids moving and meltdowns at bay. Nathan watched her when she wasn't looking, the way she crouched down to a child's level, the way her smile stayed even when her eyes looked tired. On the ride back, Jackson fell asleep against Nathan's arm. "Is he always like that?" Nathan asked, nodding toward the boy in question. "Asleep or unstoppable?" "Both." Ms. Green smiled, then added more quietly, "He's proud of you, you can tell." Nathan swallowed hard. "I don't know if I deserve that." "You're earning it," she said, "day by day." That night, after dropping Jackson off at his mother, Nathan found himself parked outside the school. No reason, just there. The building was dark, still, and for the first time it didn't feel like a place he didn't belong. He sat there a while, thinking not about meetings or deadlines, but about paper rockets and partner reading, and a woman who never seemed to stop moving. He thought about how much he'd missed, and how much, somehow, there still was to catch. The last month of school moved like a heartbeat, faster than expected, too full to name. Calendars filled with themed days, potlucks, and performances. The children began counting things down, days, assignments, silly rewards that meant more than they should. Each morning, Nathan found himself checking the time differently, no longer by meetings, but by Jackson's classroom rhythms. When was reading hour? When did the class line up for library? Was it painting day or music? Room 1B had rearranged him. He didn't say that aloud, not to anyone, but he carried it with him like a soft, steady weight behind the ribs. Jackson had changed too, more open, more certain. He brought Nathan drawings of their shared museum adventures, corrected him gently when he forgot the names of classmates. Sometimes, when Nathan read to the class, Jackson would sit cross-legged right at his feet, one hand always inching toward his father's shoe, like touching it anchored him. And Ms. Green, she was still the same in so many ways. Structured, patient, endlessly composed. But Nathan had begun to see the fine seams behind that grace, the extra care she gave to the quietest kids, the days when her hands trembled just slightly as she passed out papers, the way her eyes tracked each student like a mother bird counting her flock. One Friday afternoon, she called on him quietly as the kids filed out for art. "You're free to go," she said, not unkindly. "I know you have things to get back to." He studied her, the faint crease between her brows. "I'm not in a hurry," he said. "You okay?" She hesitated, then sat at a low table, her hands clasped loosely in her lap. The overhead lights buzzed faintly, muffled by the weight of her pause. "One of the parents sent in a complaint," she said finally. "Said I let too many visitors into the classroom, that it's disruptive." Nathan frowned. "Because of me?" She didn't answer directly. "I try to be invisible," he said. "I don't take up space." "You don't," she said. "Not in the way that matters, but some people notice change and decide it must be wrong." He watched her for a moment, unsure of what to say. Anger stirred in him, but it wasn't useful here. She didn't need fire, she needed steadiness. "Do you want me to stop coming?" he asked quietly. "No," she said, looking up at him. "I don't." The words hung there a little too long. But then she added, "We just have to be careful." Nathan nodded. He understood more than he could explain. Still, the next week he came less. He didn't disappear, but he scaled back, dropped Jackson off instead of staying, chose days when there were other volunteers around. He told himself it was respectful, told himself it was wise. But the days stretched strangely without the classroom's anchor. His office, once the center of his world, now felt like a waiting room. Jackson noticed, kids always do. "You didn't come red this week," he said one night over dinner. Nathan poked at his stir-fry. "I know, I thought maybe it was someone else's turn." "But Ms. Green always lets you," Jackson said. "She likes when you come." Nathan looked up. "Did she say that?" "She smiled different when you were there," Jackson said with a shrug. "Happy different." The word sat between them, small but weighty. He didn't ask for more. The following Monday, he brought in a box of new books for the class. Nothing extravagant, just stories he thought they'd like. Ones with dragons and shy heroes and messy friendships. He left them on Ms. Green's desk during recess, slipping out before she returned. That afternoon, he found an envelope in Jackson's backpack. Inside was a note. "Thank you, they'll love these." No signature, but her handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, steady, a little slanted to the right. A week later, the school held its annual Readers' Parade. Each student came dressed as their favorite book character. Nathan came as well, at Jackson's request, wearing a ridiculous felt crown to match Jackson's Where the Wild Things Are costume. Parents lined the gym, phones up, laughter echoing against polished floors. Ms. Green stood at the front, clipboard in hand, managing it all like a conductor of joyful chaos. Their eyes met once across the room, brief but full. Later, after the noise faded and the last crown was packed away, she found him outside near the playground. "Thank you for showing up," she said. "I always want to," he replied. This time, she didn't look away. "I know." Something shifted then, not dramatically, just the tilt of something deeper than before, a breath shared, a kind of recognition that had grown too real to pretend around. They didn't speak of it again, not in words, but Nathan kept coming, not as often as before, but enough. Enough to keep that thread between them quietly alive. The school year wound down. The children's energy spiked with summer anticipation. Jackson began talking about second grade, about pool days and popsicles. Nathan listened, half smiling, heart caught somewhere between the child his son had been and the boy he was becoming. The last week of school arrived in a blur of closing ceremonies and folded artwork coming home in paper bags. Jackson's backpack was heavier than usual, filled with goodbye cards and class photos. On the final day, he insisted Nathan walk him in. Just for a minute. Room 1B was quieter than normal, bittersweet in its stillness. Ms. Green stood at the board, erasing the calendar numbers one by one. "Hi," she said, voice lighter than it had been in weeks. "Didn't expect you this morning." "Jackson's request," Nathan said, gesturing to the boy now tying his shoes with exaggerated focus. Ms. Green nodded, then bent to help a student struggling with a zipper. When she stood again, Nathan was still watching her. "You okay?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then smiled. "Today's always a little hard. I don't know how to say goodbye to 25 versions of hope." He didn't smile, he just nodded. Jackson returned, backpack swinging. He hugged Ms. Green fiercely, then whispered something Nathan couldn't hear. She knelt to his level, kissed the top of his head, and said, "You were my wild thing, Jackson Hale. Don't ever forget that." They walked out together. Outside, Nathan opened the car door, helped Jackson buckle in. But before he climbed in himself, he turned back. She stood by the school doors, waiting, watching. He crossed the grass to her without planning to. "You'll miss him?" he asked. "I already do." "And the others?" "Yes," she said, "but him a little differently." There was no hiding it anymore, the way she looked at him. The way he'd started carrying her voice in the quietest places of his day. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but I don't want it to stop here." Ms. Green's eyes shimmered, uncertain maybe, but not closed. "I don't want it to stop either," she said. Nathan reached for her hand, hesitant at first. She let him. The bell rang behind them, the last one of the year. but neither of them moved. Summer unfolded with a quieter rhythm. No more morning bell, no permission slips or classroom calendars taped to the fridge. For the first time in years, Nathan's summer wasn't mapped in quarters or deadlines. He didn't fill it with travel or back-to-back meetings. He left his out-of-office reply on longer than necessary. Hale Industries didn't fall apart without him. That truth hit hard at first, but then it began to feel like freedom. He and Jackson spent their days simply, though simplicity took practice. They built pillow forts in the living room, made pancakes on Tuesday mornings, and got through 3 Harry Potter books by July. On weekends, Nathan took him hiking, bought popsicles from the truck that circled their neighborhood, and sometimes, when the evenings felt too wide, just sat beside him as they counted stars. But even in all of that, a part of him kept orbiting room 1B. More precisely, the woman who had made that room into something steady and alive. He and Ms. Green Claire now, as he'd started calling her only recently, texted more than they talked. Short, quiet notes, book recommendations, a picture Jackson drew for her. Once, a photo of her cat asleep inside a basket of construction paper. But they hadn't seen each other since the last day of school. He thought about reaching out, actually reaching out not as Jackson's father or the classroom helper but as himself. He rehearsed sentences, rewrote them, deleted most, then waited. And then one evening in mid-July, the message came. "Are you two free this Saturday? There's a summer reading picnic at Maple Creek. Nothing formal, just books and sun and too many juice boxes. Would love to see you both." Nathan stared at the screen for longer than he should have, then typed back, "We'll be there." The lawn behind the school was sun-drenched by the time they arrived. Blankets had been laid out beneath the old maple trees, baskets of books nestled between folding chairs and sandwich crusts. Teachers mingled with families. Kids ran barefoot over the grass. And at the center of it all was Claire. She wore a soft blue sundress, hair pulled back in a way that made her look like summer personified. She knelt beside a group of children, reading aloud with her voice slow and clear, even as one child picked grass and another tried to balance a juice pouch on his head. Nathan felt something move in his chest at the sight. She stood when she saw them. Jackson ran ahead first, launching himself into her arms without hesitation. Claire caught him with practiced ease, smiling into his shoulder before setting him down. Nathan followed, a step behind. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he returned, and it felt both ridiculously small and impossibly right. They found a spot under a tree. Jackson settled in quickly, picking a stack of picture books and plopping down beside a girl in sparkly sneakers. Claire sat next to Nathan, their knees almost touching. "It's strange," she said, watching the children spread across the grass, "seeing them here without the classroom walls." "You miss it." "I miss the structure, the rhythm, but this is nice too, everything's softer in the summer." Nathan nodded. Jackson been different. "In what way?" "Lighter," he hums while he brushes his teeth now. She smiled. "That's a good sign." "I think it started with you," he said, not looking away. "What you gave him, what you gave me." She met his gaze then. "You were already there, Nathan. You just needed the space to remember." He swallowed. "You gave me that." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't ask to be filled. Around them, laughter bubbled. A breeze swept through the grass, sending a few loose pages fluttering. "I want to see where this goes," he said quietly. "Not just for Jackson, for us." Claire looked down at her lap, then back at him. "I've been thinking about that," she admitted. "How strange it is, how slow and steady it's been, and how it feels exactly right." A smile tugged at the edge of her lips. "I don't know what this is, Nathan, but I want to find out." He reached for her hand, this time without hesitation. She laced her fingers through his like it had always been meant that way. Later, as the sun began its slow descent and families began packing up, Jackson crawled into Nathan's lap, sticky with watermelon and drowsy from the heat. "Can we come again next year?" he asked. Nathan looked to Claire. She tilted her head, her smile answering before her words did. "Yes," he said softly, arms wrapping around his son. "We'll be here." They stayed until the lawn emptied, until the sky turned gold and the shadows stretched long and slow. Nathan had signed up for career day thinking he would teach something about success. Instead, he had learned about presence. He had walked into room 1B as a visitor, a CEO with a perfectly curated life. He walked away with something quieter, something real. And this time when he left, his heart didn't stay behind. It walked forward, held gently in the hands of a boy with wild dreams, and a woman who saw them both clearly all along.